Hello, this is Anna Imagination with the Healing Garden. And welcome to week 2 of 8 weeks to inner peace. This week, we are going to be focusing specifically on emotions. Now, I have a very different way of handling emotions, of explaining how they work than anything else out there. Out there, you're going to hear about tertiary emotions and pyramids. You're going to hear about a whole lot of other stuff. And the problem with that approach is it changes how we think about emotions. And that's the problem. So the way I do emotions is designed in such a way to help you use them as a tool so you have a better idea how to manage and use them. We're going to start by covering what exactly emotions are and what they're for. And we're also going to go a little bit into basically, just for the sake of naming, we're going to talk about why we have the approach we have with emotions and how we are used to handling them in our society. At some point, specifically in the 17th century, possibly sooner, it was basically considered bad form to have any kind of an emotion. It was very much logic versus emotion. And because emotions were completely misunderstood and viewed as the weaker sex, there became a very misogynistic association with emotions, and emotions were deemed illogical. This evolved over the centuries and carried down through propaganda, through media, and as the hierarchy, the patriarchy, split and divided, there was very much this versus. This is one of the things that contributed to what I refer to as the gender wars. The patriarchy was literally coined by a philosopher of the 1600s, 1627, 1626, I believe. And this philosopher, I believe his name was John Filmer, was responsible for the word patriarchy. And he basically wrote this whole thing about the hierarchy between God, man, and woman. And with this division, the concept of emotions basically got deemed over to women. And that is still around today. So here we are, 500 years later, still thinking like we're in the 1600s. And unfortunately, emotions very much get that slotted. They're illogical. And my beautiful, beautiful, beloved Spock does not help this at all with his emotions are illogical. In point of fact, emotions are very logical. And when you understand the logic of an emotion, it completely changes the way we work with them. So the general understanding of emotions stems from this concept that emotions are unwanted, they are misunderstood, and as a result, they are labeled as useless things that are weak, and it's understood that we suppress them. And that's pretty much has been the practice for centuries. You suppress them, you suppress them. And this is the practice of men. You suppress them. As started in the 1600s, that went way back. You suppress them. And the concept of controlling your emotions was the concept of disciplining yourself so that you suppress them. Now, what you're actually doing when you suppress an emotion is you are conditioning your mind. This is psychologically disturbing for me and in so many ways. And I'm going to break this down as to why. But when you are suppressing your emotions, you are literally teaching yourself that emotions are dangerous. Now, the problem is, this is literally, the emotions belong to the subconscious mind. So when you teach your subconscious mind that emotions are dangerous, you are literally conditioning your subconscious mind to amputate a part of its own self. So when I say to you during the next 30, 40 minutes, as I elaborate on how destructive it is that we suppress emotions, I want you to keep in mind that they come from and they belong to the subconscious mind. Now, the subconscious mind is not consciously aware. The subconscious mind is only logical. There's nothing else to it. Ironically, for something so illogical, it actually produces some very effective methods for communicating to you what needs to be done. Emotions are your check engine light. That's it. They are your check engine light. And this week we are going to be covering the entire manual of all of your check engine lights. Now, you have heard people tell you, and you have probably been the experience of, or you are very adamant about never ignoring the check engine light. That's like the thing that we teach people, that we say, you do not ignore the check engine light. But that's what we're doing. They are very much the check engine light. Understanding what they're for, how they are used, and where they come from tells us a lot. Furthermore, once you understand why we have them and how they're produced and what they're supposed to be used for, it completely clears up a lot, which is what we're going to be covering today. And then tomorrow and then the other 4 days, we're going to be breaking up all the different emotions and breaking each one of them down, showing you the spectrums that they're on, which ones collaborate, which ones work off of each other. And then I'm going to be giving you instructions on how to handle each and every one of these. Because as you do shadow work, we don't do shadow work, we do something different here. As we do limiting toxic beliefs, as we go through all of the process to rewire your subconscious brain, your subconscious mind is going to be absolutely dumping messages to you, sending you check engine lights. And suppressing them is basically reconditioning and reaffirming that the subconscious mind needs to gnaw off its own leg. It's very self-destructive. And that's pretty much what suppressing emotions does. It teaches the subconscious mind to self-destruct. So every time you suppress an emotion, you are hitting the self-destruct button. So we're not going to do that anymore. Instead, I'm going to be showing you how to handle emotions, what they are, where they come from. So emotions, they are the check engine lights, and their purpose is to tell you when there is a problem in your psychology that you need to address. It is a communication between your subconscious mind and you, the ego, your conscious awareness. The conscious awareness is the ego. The alter ego is the face, the mask, the behavioral defense that you create that you put on in society so you'll fit in. And your subconscious mind is the super ego. So when you understand all of these different little players, it really changes a lot. So your emotions are literally the super ego providing data to the ego to tell you, this is what's going on upstairs, this is the status, this is what needs to happen. But we were never taught anything about emotions. So now we're going to break them down. Emotions come from 4 locations, only 4. Every one of these locations has to be handled a different way. There are only 4 answers here. There are only 4 answers. So when you have an emotion, you have 4 options. Knowing which emotion comes from where will tell you how to handle each one of these. My self-care program grooms you for this. We're going to go over that. I'm going to be walking you through all of these, okay? So the first thing we're going to go over is emotions that come from your identity. The second is the emotions that come from your fear system. The others are the emotions that come from your cognitive core. And then the emotions that come from your intuition. Now you have 2 other sub-locations. The first sub-location is the emotions that come from your defense system. This is related to your identity. And then the other subcategory is from your fear system, the emotions that come from your guilt system. All right. So that's it. You got 4 emotions. And we're going to go through this. We're going to start with intuition because intuition is easy. Intuition is weird because it actually comes around the body. You're going to feel intuition from your shoulders all the way down to, well, your groin. And it covers everything in this region. This is important. If you're feeling it in your gut, that is your intuition. If you're feeling it in your heart, that is your intuition. Everything from intuition is a green light go. You want to listen to these emotions. All emotions from intuition is basically yes, no, wait. 3 emotions. Yes, no, or wait. This is your gut instinct. This is your warning system that tells you that doesn't feel right. And then you have yes. And if you are a generator, if you're into human design, if you are a generator, you're going to be very familiar with yes. And then there is wait, pause, patience. That's another huge thing. So those are your options. Yes. Ooh, no. Like it's all in the gut. It's all in the gut. It's in the chest. It's in your groin. All of that is your intuition. The next one is your identity. Identity is love, and that is literally the primary emotion. That is the emotion that comes out of who you are. That is your identity. What you love. Think about foods you love. Think about animals you love. Think about things you love. Things, not people. That's a whole nother that's sticky. We're going to get into that later. But think about what you love. Think about like what foods. Absolutely think about items. Think about the things that you collect around yourself to celebrate yourself. That is love. Now, from love, you have, of course, joy, happiness. You have all of those wonderful, happy emotions. Okay. That is all love. That is everything fantastic. Every time you get an emotion from identity, this is a solid fuck yes, you do. Green light, do everything identity wants. And I cannot emphasize this enough. This is the problem. Identity says, let's go, do, dream, want, desire, imagine, go. And intuition says, yes, no, wait. That's the exchange. But this is where outside forces interfere and it's shut off. And that's where we get into the fear system. That's where we get into the fear system. So the other section of identity is the defense system. And the defense system has 3 parts to it, only 3 emotions. The first emotion from the defense system is anger. Anger is pure self-love. Anger is self-love. Now, a lot of people confuse aggression with anger, and that is not true. Aggression is under the fear system. Aggression has nothing to do with anger. I will be talking a lot about this later. So for now, fear system, I'm just going to go ahead and write aggression is under the fear system, but anger is actually under self-love. The other emotion that comes from the defense system is caution. Oh, and there's one more emotion that comes out of the defense system. I cannot think of it right now, and I might have to go back on my notes. And then I will be covering it later if I need to, or I'll be documenting it down below to fill it all in. But there's 3 emotions that come from the defense system. Caution, anger. What's the other one? My problem is I have like papers all over my house. I'll go over it later. But the defense system, when you have an emotion from the defense system, what you end up getting is communication. That's the only answer here. Communication. And that's the problem. That is your defense. You need to use your voice. You need to use your throat chakra, and you need to speak. Absolutely. There's no other, this is it. There is no negotiation here. When your defense system turns on, you need to be setting boundaries, verbal boundaries. And then if need be, enforce those boundaries. Take action, not aggression, action. The problem that we run into is we are taught at an early age that talking is dangerous, and that actually shuts down our defense system. So what ends up happening is when you feel anger, you suppress it. You instead tell the subconscious mind to gnaw off its leg, and you suppress the anger, and then you bottle it up. Other people immediately convert that over to the fear system, and that's when they become abusive. That's when they become violent. That's when they become aggressive, is because they go from anger and the fear system immediately turns on. Caution is basically God, I wish I could remember that other emotion. You know what? My subconscious mind is not letting me. That's why. My subconscious mind is interfering with my work. Again, it's trying to keep me from something. And I already wrote it down somewhere and it's in my papers. But it's like caution. It's similar. It's related to caution. And what these emotions do is basically they warn you that you're needing to be careful. You're needing to step up. Is it confusion? Confusion is a very specific emotion. I'm going to say it's confusion, but confusion is yes, it's confusion. It is confusion, but confusion has a caveat to it. And we're going to go over confusion later. So you have anger, you have caution, you have confusion, and that is your defense system. And then your other system is the guilt system. Guilt is beautiful. Now, guilt is funny because it's actually a misnomer. The actual emotion is shame, but no one ever calls it shame. There's a lot of confusion. Shame is actually what you feel. That disgusting, ooh, I shouldn't do this. That is actually shame. It's not guilt. Guilt is actually a different emotion that has nothing to do with the guilt system. So this is a misnomer, and this is where things can get really confusing. So it's actually shame that I'm referring to, not guilt. It's your shame system. Let's change that right now. We're gonna the healing garden this, and I'm gonna call it what it is. It's the shame system. It is not guilt. It is shame, and it is the emotion that many of us think of when we call it guilt. It's not guilt. Guilt actually belongs to your identity. Guilt is part of your defense system, but it's like a subcategory of it. And again, we'll go over that later. But that's the real guilt. And that's the one that most people never feel because they have no idea what it actually feels like, because it's almost never an issue, because too many people are told what to think and what to feel and what ethics should be in place. So almost never do we actually feel authentic guilt. And I'm going to call it that, authentic guilt, to establish the difference between shame, what we call guilt, and authentic guilt. So we'll be going over those. But authentic guilt is part of your defense system. So shame is actually one emotion, one core emotion, one core belief that's fear-based, and it's never talked about. Guilt or shame is actually a fear of rejection, and that is it. There is nothing else here. Shame is 100% you were threatened. Your belonging was threatened. Where you belong was threatened. So you have a fear of rejection. And the emotion shame, which is a third party emotion telling you shouldn't do something, that's the shame. That is actually triggering a fear of rejection, which is why the shame system is part of the fear system. Fear. Fear is aggression and fear. And that's really all you've got. That is it. You've got panic. You have anxiety. This is all coming from the fear system, all of it. You have worry, concern. There it is. Concern, not confusion. Concern is the emotion from the defense system. Being concerned. And then it goes up to cautious and then anger. That's it. It's concern, caution, and anger. Confusion is something different. Confusion, that's a special emotion. Yeah, we're going to talk about confusion. Confusion is also authentic guilt. Those are the two that are kind of like on a different category, and they're like the word weird. I before E, except after C. It's like those. Those are the exceptions to the rules. So fear, panic, anxiety, and that's all coming out of the fear system. The only way to handle the fear system, including fear of rejection, is a four-part system. And we're going to cover that in a moment. No, we're going to cover it right now, and then I'll get into the cognitive core. So the fear system requires four parts to handling these emotions. Validate, name. We're going to go over this in depth this week. Validate and naming. The second is empathy. You need to empathize with the fear. The second is soothe and then reassure. And these four emotions are 100% how you handle any and all fear-based. Anxiety is a little different. Anxiety is a compound emotion. We're going to be talking about compound or complex emotions later. The name, validation, empathize, soothe, reassure is a four-part process, which is basically you have fear and your fear is absolutely screaming and running around. I need you to imagine that fear is a panicking, illogical child. The only thing this child needs is a mother to soothe it. This is when we get back into our comfort zone. That then becomes our growth zone, which then becomes the dark abyss of fear. And I literally refer to it as the dark abyss because that is where fear is. It is the unknown. And you're supposed to have your comfort zone. That's the mother. And then you're supposed to venture away and grow and experience and have your adventures. I also call the growth zone the adventure zone. But then you go too far, you hit the dark abyss, which is fear. And then you're supposed to run back to mother for comfort. Comfort is a four-part process. Validate, name, empathize, soothe, and reassure. That is comfort. That is what is supposed to be happening when you seek comfort. That is what the fear system requires, is that four-part comforting system. And then you are supposed to ground yourself and re-energize, recharge your energy. That is what you are supposed to be doing. Comfort, validate, empathize, soothe, and reassure. But we're not. The last one is the cognitive core emotions. This is where things get real fun. The cognitive core emotions are the actual subconscious mind's job. These emotions are not good or bad. They are a status report. All of the emotions that I gave you under fear are what happens when things go wrong in your cognitive core processing. But we start with the cognitive core. The cognitive core is an abstract concept that I made up to help people understand how processing works. The cognitive core is how your beliefs get processed into perspective. This is literally how perspectives are made. A perspective is a truth. There are 8 truths, 8 different perspectives. We will be going over this in week 3 or week 4. I have to go back on my notes. But we will be covering the 8 perspectives. For now, understand that there are 8 different options, and this is how a perspective is made. There are 5 slots to this beautiful machine, this abstract concept. Imagine this rectangle box. The first one is what you love, your identity. And that's where you are when you're a child. It's an accumulation of everything you love. By the time you are 4, you should have your ethics. This is an emphasis. Basically, it's a moral code based off of what you love. Your ethics or moral code. And it is 100% based off of what you love. For example, I love using this example because it's spot on. I love animals. I mean, I really love animals. My moral code, my ethics is that animals are equal to humans. I'm not better than any cat or dog. They are not beneath me. There is no hierarchy. They are my equal. Therefore, I do not eat them. Period. They are my ethical code. It doesn't have any emotion to it. The ethical code has no emotion. It's a law. It is a personal law. I'm going to really emphasize the word here, personal law, because that is fuck important. And your personal laws are built off of what you love. What you love is what you value and what you prioritize. What you love is a celebration of you. It's what you care about. It's what defines us. The accumulation of everything we love is what defines us. So you have love, which creates your personal law, which is your ethical moral code. The third category is your beliefs. And that's where things start to get sticky. Beliefs are supposed to be unemotional, and they are supposed to be based on your identity and your ethics. The further you get away from love, the less emotion there is. Love itself is not actually emotional. That's really important. I love tea. There is no emotion here. None. It is a joyous celebration at a 1. I get a warm, fuzzy feeling, and that's about it. I love Earl Grey hot. There's no emotion. It is just a celebration of my identity. That's all it is. It is a state of being. And this cup and my hot tea is part of who I am. It's my identity. My ethics are to appreciate, I'm a Taurus, this is part of me, is to appreciate food and the gorgeous artwork of this cup, because I also really love the history of the blue willow, pink willow sets. So that's part of my ethical code, is to appreciate, to be grateful for, to celebrate, to honor. These things are very much part of my ethical code. 0 emotion. My beliefs are that you respect this, that you indulge, to remind yourself who you are and what you love. My beliefs are that we should enjoy these things. Unemotional. The next one is basically the naming. It is the concept of definition. It is the defining what you are. It is the summation of identity, ethics, and beliefs. It is the name in which you call all of this. This is where labels start to come into it. Well, not really. That's something else. And we're going to get into that in a minute. So it's, let me try it this way. Oh, here you go. This is fantastic. So I love animals, and my ethic is to not eat animals. And I believe that we should not eat animals. My name is vegetarian. See how that works? That's it right there. My perspective is now solid. Solid. I know where I stand on the topic. What about fish? Same thing with fish. I will not eat fish because I cannot put flesh in my mouth. So that is my perspective. Actually, my specific perspective is 8. What I'm describing is the 6th perspective. Again, we'll get into that later. So that is my solid truth. My truth is now defined. I am. When I tell you to make I am statements, you are pulling from that fourth part of your cognitive core. When I tell you to be grateful and just write down what you are thankful for, I am telling you to pull from the first compartment. There you go. I am having you think about what you love. I am pulling you into your first compartment. Who are you? What do you love? What are you grateful for? What do you have? That's what you are accessing when you manifest. This is important because this is also where manifestation takes place. And this is also what we are accessing when we are defining ourselves and when we are restoring our identity. This is your cognitive core. The second part, your ethics, your personal law. I'm going to be talking a lot about your ethical perspective. This is it. Your ethical perspective is defined right here. The third is your beliefs, what you believe based off of your love and your ethics. And then the I am, your names, who you are, is actually articulating. The naming is attached to your defense system. That is your communication center. That is why it's linked to your naming. That is really important later. And then the summation of these things creates your perspective. Now, every one of these things, every one of these defined things goes through all of it. Now, your data, when your data comes in, it all goes down into your beliefs. Data is received. Imagine a funnel over that third middle thing, and data is received. You hear people telling you things. You hear the news. You read newspapers. You see something across the street. You hear gossip. All of that. 5 senses, our eyesight, our nose, our taste, touch, smell. All of that comes in. And it bombards us. I think we receive it was 70,000 pieces of data a day. A day. 70,000. And all that just keeps coming in. All of it keeps coming in, and it filters all right down into your beliefs. Now, when it comes in, it goes through a process. It's either going to do one of 3 things. 1, it enhances your perspective. It does nothing to your perspective, or it changes your perspective. Those are your 3 options. It solidifies it, it neutralizes, which means it has no effect, or it changes it. Now, imagine that this cognitive core is actually a telescope. I love doing this. Telescope. And every time you have beliefs come in, what you're really doing is you're adjusting accordingly. Now, this is where emotions come in. There are 12 stages of emotions, 12 points of all of this. The first stage is shock, negotiation, assessment. This is when you sit down and you go, well, we got new data here. Wait, what? Pause. Stop everything. Look at this thing. Are you sure? This is the negotiation stage. This is we have new data. Stop everything. We have the emotion surprise. Sound familiar? We have the emotion shock. We have the emotion negotiation. We have the emotion curiosity. All of those are from the cognitive core. Assessing, what is this thing? Can it go into the cognitive core? Because this is really important. It takes a lot to adjust this goddamn thing. When you have an epiphany, it's because you've received so much data that the cognitive core shifts and your perspective shifts. And then you get a massive surge of dopamine. Massive. That is going to cause you a lot on your brain and your system. because it's going to cause so much onto your system, the subconscious mind is already at work protecting you from changing your perspective. This cognitive core is fragile, delicate, important. Oh, so fucking important. It is the most important thing in your brain. We do not fuck with the cognitive core. You fuck with the cognitive core and you will develop mental illness. I'm going to be showing you how. So the first stage is that surprise, shock, negotiation, and assessment. This is where you get awe. The next stage that you're going to run into, with surprise, shock, awe, negotiation, and assessment is thinking here. Just a minute. Yeah, okay. Is a realization or an acceptance that yes, it is in fact data that is going to go inside your cognitive core. Assessment has been complete and you have either rejected as bullshit. Seriously, it's when you hear something, oh, that's bullshit. That is disbelief. So you have the emotion disbelief. Disbelief is really, really important. Really important. Disbelief is a vital emotion. Okay? It is the emotion that rejects data, that rejects thought. It is the fail-safe to make sure that something cannot go into the process to shift the perspective. And then there is an immediate inventory that is taken. And the assessment determines if you're going to get gain or loss. There's going to be an adjustment on whether or not you experience a surplus or a loss. These are the emotions scarcity and abundance. This is where they are. You see how they are related to and around the belief system. Once you assess the spectrum of scarcity and abundance or neutrality, it continues. The process continues. Data is received. Processing is continued. Scarcity and abundance are weighed. It's decided. If it falls to the side of scarcity, you will experience grief, loss, sad. And if it falls to the side of abundance, you will experience joy, elation, euphoria. If there are no changes, it's indifference. Processing continues. The next stage in the process is quantity. Quantity of change. Is it a drastic change? Is it a drastic loss? Now, this is where the perspective starts to shift. The larger the perspective shift in degrees, the more trauma to the system. The perspective shift should never be more than just a couple of degrees. So if it is forced to move massive amounts, what you have lost is stability. When you lose stability, even if it's positively gaining, you're going to grieve. This is also where you might feel the emotion relief, instability, uncertainty. I just got to say it. Holy shit, this is so fucking awesome. I love this shit. When I broke all this down, it was just like this makes so much sense. And I loved it. It was like, these were all the emotions come from. This is where all the emotions come from. Now, if you are emotionally healthy, if you are emotionally stable, and once you have your emotions all figured out, once you reach optimum mental wealth, you're going to process these things like, all right, I'm at this stage of the processing. Beliefs are coming in. Everything is good. Oh, there's a loss. Oh, okay. I can feel it now. There's the loss. Yep. All right. All right. So take it, accept it, process it. Yep. Allow it. Cool. Everything's all right. All right. I did it. And really, every time I feel my processing happen, I celebrate now. I'm like, yeah, my processing is working. It's awesome. It's so fucking fantastic. This is like my favorite thing in all the shit I've done. This is my favorite. All right, cognitive core processing. So you get relief, you get instability, and you get uncertainty. Now, that is going to activate or alert your defense system. It's going to poke up its head and it's going to look around. And that's where you get angry to defend yourself, or you get cautious or uncertain. What's going on? The defense system is part of this. That's good. It's bad when your defense system is gone and fear has to step in. That's when shit hits the fan. So we're going to continue. Let's assume that defense is in place. So you feel cautious. All right, it's all right. You soothe it. You feel it's okay. It's all right. I know. All right. So I got a raise, and that's going to change ABC, and I'm going to get more responsibilities, and I'm going to have uncertainty. So I feel nervous. Nervous is okay. Nervous is also part of your defense system. Okay. And that's okay. That's all right. That's all right. Everything's good. Everything's all right. All right. We're going with this. All right. It's going to be all right. And you reassure yourself. You use those beliefs, and it's like, all right, you reassure, you soothe, you go into the comfort. You're all right. Everything's working fine. And then you start, this is my favorite part. You start doing the logical, mathematical, statistical shit. You start doing forecasting. I love the forecasting stage. I used to be a purchasing manager. So when I was a buyer, I had to do forecasting. Forecasting is economic talk for trying to figure out how much loss or how much gain you're going to experience. And if you're really, really good at it, great. And if you're off, you suck at your job, according to purchasing management. Now, this is where optimism and pessimism enter the equation. Optimism is the person who over forecasts, and pessimism is the person who under forecasts. And the realist is actually someone who's just really good at forecasting. Optimism is also part of manifestation and related to scarcity and abundance and related to the belief system. And then the pessimist is going to have a focal point mindset. This is all mindset now. The mindset affects your cognitive core. What's going to happen is your pessimist side, the pessimist, would then overestimate on the losses. Or if you had gains, it would still see the losses. That's pessimism. The realist is just someone who's really fucking accurate and really good at projection. But if you're manifesting, you're really going to want to push your optimism over. And that's all based off of your mindset and your beliefs, which run this whole thing. It's pretty cool. So then you get into the last stage, which is acceptance. Well, there's also depression. This is where you feel sad because you have the loss. But then depression takes it to something else, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So the last stage is acceptance. That's when you, okay, all right, we at it, everything's good. And then there's the anticipation. You get the, all right, it's all feeling good, everything's fine. The changes come in, you've accepted, and it's good. Now, if you overestimated and then the reality hits, you're going to get new data re-entered back into your belief system, and it's going to have to repeat itself because you overestimated and you fell short, and now you have to adjust your perspective accordingly. If you underestimated and you end up with a surplus, you have to go back through the process and readjust it accordingly. If you are really good at forecasting and you were spot on with your estimate, you're done. The processing is complete. When you grieve, when you have anger management problems, and when you go through a breakup. There are 3 places where this whole process can stall out. This is called the stages of grief. When you stall out, the emotion disbelief is basically used by your fear system to reject an unwanted perspective change. So what ends up happening is as you get data into your cognitive core and the perspective starts to shift, we have the ability to kind of predict how this is going to go. And it happens so fucking fast. So what ends up happening is if we start to anticipate an outcome that we don't want, one of the defense systems that fear system uses is a rejection of the belief. And in the middle of the cognitive core processing, in the middle of it, disbelief will be inserted into the program to stall it out, which means if you go through a breakup, because the adjustment to the cognitive core is so sudden, because it's usually blindsided and you're like, wait, we're breaking up, that instantly disbelief will get inserted into the system and the shift will pause. And now you're in the middle of a processing from your cognitive core and it's not going anywhere. So now you're stuck in negotiation. What do you mean you're breaking up with me? Well, can't we fix this? I don't understand. Can't we do this? Are you sure? Do you want? And now a year has gone by and you are still negotiating the terms of a breakup that you don't want because the disbelief was put into the system as a defense by your fear system to stop the process. Then we begin rumination. Rumination is the hang up of trying to continue processing. But you have a process, a belief inside your cognitive core that's stopping the whole process because the perspective won't shift. The other time this takes place is when you start going over the scarcity and the abundance. And when you start to realize something so horrific that the loss is so extraordinary, the defense system turns on and you become angry. And then disbelief comes in and you're paused. Now you've got anger management issues. Now you're stuck permanently forever anger because you saw a possible outcome in the future based off of that data that woke up your defense system, and now you're stuck because you haven't finished processing. This one we all know and love. Not love. That was facetious. I don't know what that was. This one is all very dear to our hearts. Grief. When we experience a loss so great and the grief hits us and we start to see and imagine life with that loss, it is so severe that the cognitive core freezes and the disbelief stops the entire processing and we get stuck in grief because we cannot believe, we cannot accept that they are gone. That is the stages of grief. This is why we get stuck in grief. It's because we rejected the conclusion. We rejected the perspective. We don't want that reality. We don't want that truth. We are resisting the truth. When you manifest, we're going to be talking a lot about resistance and acceptance. This is why. This is why. Because when you're resisting, you're not accepting the perspective that is coming to you. And now you have literally completely shaken up the entire cognitive core. So all of these emotions are coming from your cognitive core. Understanding what they are is basically little messages coming in to you, reporting in, going, this is the status on the cognitive core today. This is everything that's going on. We got about 7,000 different beliefs today, and this is the result of them. Everything seemed to process very well, except there was something that was said by the boyfriend this morning, and that immediately made things alter about 4 degrees to the left. And that has put some insecurity and doubt in your mind. But don't worry, the defense system woke up and she communicated everything she needs, so everything's okay. Just take care of that however you need. You're supposed to take all of these emotions and go, okay, so we got security today. All right, so I need to use communication to talk to the boyfriend and figure out exactly what that's about and clarify that. And then you said, what else is going on? That I'm now concerned and worried. So I'm going to go ahead and access my defense system and make sure I use my communications and boundaries on the boyfriend to make sure that that's already taken care of. How's everything else looking down there? And then they'll come along and said, well, there was possible talk about you getting a raise today, and that came through. So there is now a rumor floating around that you might get a raise. You feel the anticipation and the excitement. Oh, we need to keep that in check because that is just hearsay and that is a rumor at this time, but let's go ahead and process that for later. What's the emotion status on that? We should probably get that clarified. So why don't you go ahead and talk to the boss and make sure there's any kind of doubt, that way the processing doesn't get stalled out. And welcome to managing your emotions. It's really awesome. So this is your cognitive core. Now, in the case of trauma, this is where shit hits the fan. This is your perspective, your truth. You have your ethical perspective and you have your perspective. This is your gorgeous brain. But people come in and they force beliefs into your belief system. They physically, using words, using violence, using sexual assault, will attack your cognitive core. This is when everything goes wrong. I'm going to go ahead and leave that later because that's where it gets really sticky, and that's the other half of this. Right now, that is what it's supposed to look like. So when you have emotions that come in from the cognitive core, that means you need to be accessing your manifestation powers. You need to be confirming that you have a positive mindset. You have to make sure that your belief system is sharp and on par because it's going to be directing and shifting all of this. You want to make sure that your forecasting is spot on. So you want to make sure your mindset is more positive and neutral than it is negative. In addition to that, you want to make sure that you are open to the abundance, not the scarcity side. And when you get down into the acceptance stage versus the rejection, you're going to want to make sure you're open up to accept. That is your responsibility. When you manifest, manifestation is actually the process of putting everything through on a positive side, on an intentional positive side through your cognitive core so that your processing actually lands on a positive note, which will bring you and attract to you more positive results. And yes, physics is very much involved in this because every one of these emotions is emotionally and negatively charged. Every emotion has a negative and a positive charge to it. Giving is a phenomenal emotion. Every emotion going one direction has a negative charge, and going the opposite direction has a positive charge. Giving. Gifts are very much, there's the giving and then there's the receiving. There's taking and being robbed. There's 4 different emotions with one action, with one emotion. One emotion, 4 different outcomes. 2 of those are very negative. 2 of those are positive. Giving and receiving is absolutely beautiful, but they feel different. Even though it's giving, it's different. It's different for both sides, but it's both positive. Giving and receiving is positive charged, but taking and being taken from are negative. That accesses scarcity. So when you have gift and it's being taken or forced and you are being robbed, it's still giving, but it's the negative side of it. On the positive side of that is abundance, where you are giving and you are receiving. Every emotion has a pathway, negative and positive charged. Now, when you look at the electromagnetic field, all of those emotions are dumping off positives and negatives. That's why we say things like think positive, think negative, good vibes, bad vibes. We are actually referring to the physics of emotions. Now, those physics, those magnetically charged energies back and forth are pulling on the energy field, the electromagnetic field in the entire world. The electromagnetic field flows up and through us, right through our magnetically charged spinal cord and into our brain, which is just a massive energy circuit. Now, emotions are dumping off these charges left and right and releasing hormones due to electrical charges that are set off to cue off the actual emotions. This is biology and physics. This is what you are playing with when you manifest. This is how psychology is 100% biology and physics. I'm not done yet. It is a common philosophical theory. I think, therefore I am. Now we're into philosophy. So the philosophical concept, I think, therefore I am, 100% manifestation, positive charged, purposely activating the positive flow of emotions, accessing the scarcity and the abundance, which is now optimism, pulling on all of those positive charges and feeding it due to magnetism from the electromagnetic field. That is how we manifest. It isn't faith, it's physics. We will be covering a lot more of this in a later week during this course. That's what you have coming. But it is very important that you understand the connotation of emotions and their importance. They are really logical. Now, all emotions come from all emotions come from beliefs, which are thoughts, which are words. Words hold the catalyst. Words are the catalyst that send off the belief, that send off the emotion, that result in the hormonal release in your brain that sets off the positive and the negative charge. That is how your words actually produce manifestation, pulling on the electromagnetic field. Now, that all being said, you have those 4 locations. You've got your cognitive core emotions. You have your identity and defense emotions. You have your fear system and your shame system emotion. And you have your intuition emotions. We're going to be covering this a lot more later, but this was a lot. And there's going to be a lot more information here on the cognitive core. In addition, I do have graphics available if you want to see all of this written down. And then this week, we're going to break this down even further. And I'm going to be showing you what each of these emotions are, how they work, the spectrum, and the reverse and the positive flow of each emotion. Every emotion is relative to a different emotion, including sometimes you have the same emotion that partners up with multiple emotions. Okay. And then we're going to get into compound emotions and complex emotions like jealousy. Jealousy, compound and complex emotions are when you have one emotion that is a cocktail of 3 other emotions. Once you understand the cocktail, you can break down the cocktail and you'll be able to address each and every problem. By the way, they're all just fear-based. Fear-based and defense system-based. That's it. Fear system and defense system-based. Once you understand the relationship between fear and defense, it will fall right into place for you. So that wraps it up in very much. I'm going to go ahead and send this video off to you. Now, I also have a playlist for emotional management classes, and that covers a lot. So if you want to go ahead and jump into that, knock yourself out. That's available on YouTube. And what I offer here is, in addition to my playlist on YouTube, is a very precise breakdown to make sure every point and element is addressed in the Emotional Week course. So that is everything. If you have any questions, anything at all, please message me, DM me, reach out to me. I have a group chat. So jump into the group chat and blow my phone up. Ask me any questions you have. Ask me anything you need about this. I will rip it apart for you. If you have emotions that are intense and cannot wait, don't wait. Message me. Absolutely get on and be like, these are the emotions I'm dealing with. Can you help me understand where they're coming from? And I'll go, oh yeah, boom, boom, boom. And I can tell you exactly which of these 4 locations it comes from. And once you know which of the 4 locations they all come from, you'll be able to know exactly what you're supposed to do with them. Do not suppress these gorgeous little babies. Okay. So thank you so, so much. And may the kindest of words always find you.